Good morning and welcome to a LinkedIn Live session. This is the first in a new series of content supporting the launch of my new book. There is the front cover, Planning for Success, a practical guide to setting and achieving your social media marketing goals. The book, it started off as a second version to a previous book I published in 2016. You may have read it, hope you have, called Relax, It's Only Social Media. But in fact, it turned into far more than a second version and is a completely different book, which has at its core the fundamentals of marketing, how to write a social media marketing plan, and it will be ready very soon. I'm just waiting to sign off the final version of paperback. Then it will be available in Kindle and audiobook. So please do make sure you're connected to me and following me for the release date. It is very imminent. So I wanted to do a series of LinkedIn Lives to really dive in to some of the content that's in the book, to bring it to life and explore it with some friends. And today our focus is going to be about being prepared for social media challenges. While, social media does offer incredible opportunities, we need to be real and know that sometimes things can go awry. Mistakes do happen. Not all interactions are positive. I'm sure many of you that are watching this either live or on the recording may have experienced some of these. So today we're going to hopefully share some advice and experiences and thoughts of our own to help you navigate those situations. Stephen, thank you for joining me. My guest, Stephen Murray from Harrison Clark Rickerby's HCR Law, highly respected law firm. You're based in Cheltenham, but there's over 10 locations in England and Wales. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Luan. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a bit of background about myself. I head up the intellectual property and tech disputes within HCR. So I deal with a variety of matters involving copyright infringements, IT disputes, but I also advise significantly on social media and reputational impacts that can happen to businesses. So hopefully we'll touch on some of those points during the course of our call.
Yeah. I'm excited to have this opportunity to ask you my own questions as well. So I have prepped some questions for Stephen. We're aiming for about 30 minutes, but if you've watched my LinkedIn Lives before, you know that they can go on a little bit longer. While we can't address specific situations, do feel free to use the chat if you're watching this live. Share your comments, your experiences, and if you've got any kind of general questions, then please do pop them in the chat and I'll pick them up as we go through. So my first question and area is, when I'm working with organisations and whether I'm consulting with them or training with them, very often my first question is about, do you have a social media policy? Sometimes the answer is, what's one of those? Sometimes there's a search on a system and, oh yeah, here it is. So the second question is then, do people know what's in it? And, how well has this been circulated and understood? That's where I try to start and advocate that there should be a social media policy. Let's have a chat about your thoughts on social media policy and what it needs to include.
I think it's imperative that a business has social media policies. It would be naive of an organisation to think that their staff don't have social media accounts. Whether it be Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, the way we communicate now is largely online through those social media accounts. The importance from an organisation's point of view is that each of your members of staff are ambassadors for your organisation. If they have their accounts linked or even mentioning where they work, anything that they say could have a reflection on that organisation. So it's important to ensure that the staff understand that even if they're not in work when they're on their social media accounts, although most people will be checking their accounts at lunchtime, they need to be alive to the fact that what they say could implicate or have an adverse impact on their employer.
And I think in terms of these policies, it shouldn't be a scary thing. And this isn't a document around don't do anything, we don't want you to do anything. Actually, my reason for asking about them is that they should be empowering people to get involved and support the organisation. We know that success on social media can't just come from a marketing team of one or a larger marketing team, that actually this is an empowering document with some do's as well as don'ts.
Absolutely. I mean, we attract business ourselves through the articles that we post on LinkedIn and other social media outlets. So making sure that the content is on the same message as the organisation, using a similar voice, touching on the aspects which we think our consumers will find relevant. So the social media policy will address those. You talk about what you should look to do. You link in with the right people, like each other's posts, repost and comment to make sure that the message gets as wide and far as possible. I mean, this talk, for example, a lot of my colleagues have reposted it, and hopefully that's led to a few more people listening to us right now. But so the power is there, and it will benefit the business if the message is spread, but it just has to be the right message. So the balance that you find with a social media policy is giving the employee an idea of what type of things they think they should be posting, where they need to be wary and make sure that they're on message as far as they can do. And if their organisation has a marketing team, then they're the best people to talk to about that, and also attend training sessions with yourself.
Thank you. What I've found useful in developing these, and of course, absolutely, I advocate getting a legal expertise in signing these off, but just have a conversation with different members of your team, so that this isn't just the marketer or just the HR team. This is a breadth of input into the policy, and I tend to have like this discussion guide that is focused around who should we comment on and connect with. Are we happy to connect with competitors and comment on, or is this a no-no, or those kind of do's and don'ts, and actually having that consideration?
I think it's useful to see what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
I concede I follow a couple of the local law firms to see what posts are coming out from them. Seeing if they're on a similar message. So I don't think there's anything wrong with following an organisation that your employer might be in competition with, because it's useful intel. We won't. One person cannot know everything, and therefore, the more information you can absorb, the better. And if it's your competitors that are putting that information out, great. Applaud them. When you're seen as supporting and praising your colleagues and competitors, I think that sends the right message about you and your organisation. So I don't think it's a to avoid column to follow your competitors. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But useful to just have that discussion internally, as I say, kind of empowering people and going, this is okay, this is what we would prefer, or perhaps this is what to avoid. And I would expand that to, these are the people that we want to be mentioning, and these are the publications that we want to be sharing from, and perhaps these are some publications that we don't want to share from because we don't, there's ethical considerations around that as well. So have the conversation and keep it broad. It's not a tight legalese document.
Yeah, we're all adults. There's a large amount of common sense to be deployed whenever approaching posting on social media. The policy's there to give guidelines, create a loose structure as to how best to approach. It's not there to dictate what you can and you can't do, but it's there to encourage the employee to be mindful of what they're doing and who they're connecting with. Yeah.
Love a social media policy, and reading them as well. You can find them for organisations if you Google. This was in the news with the Gary Lineker Match of the Day thing a little while ago. That does show the power of these documents.
Indeed.
We haven't got any questions yet, so I'm going to move on with my next one, which is around online safety and privacy settings. Again, I think my first question is social media policy. My next one is, do you know what you're sharing and who you're sharing it with? And very often, I know we all do it. We set up accounts on social media. We click that we've read the terms and conditions very quickly. We want to dive in, and actually the default setting is that things on social media profiles, your Facebook account, your LinkedIn account, TikTok, is that everything is fully visible. And, I will go through these with people and say, you can have some control over what you're sharing and with whom, and whether you can be tagged in photos or not. My life isn't that interesting, but I still don't want people tagging me on photos on Facebook without my level of control over them. I will put some links in the chat of this later around each platform's, how to change those privacy and settings. But Stephen, what advice do you have around protecting your privacy online? And let's dive into, this is a popular topic. We haven't talked about it for a while, GDPR and data.
Yes, GDPR gave me many sleepless nights about 5 years ago, and occasionally still does. I think as individuals, we've got to approach this in the same way we would do in the real world. You're not going to leave your bank statements outside your front door so people can see what you've been spending your money on. You're not going to project all your photographs outside the front of your house. So why would you do that on social media? It comes back to the point I was making earlier about common sense. It's important to protect your own data because nobody else will do as good a job of protecting your data as you will. So be cautious about what you share. There's signing in forms that you're asked to provide. A name, an email address is probably, for a social media account point of view, as much as they're really going to need. If they start asking further questions of what your salary bracket is, what age bracket you're in, then I'd be backing out straight away, because for what purpose do they need that? The reality is to make money, because they will sell that data to telephone call centers to try and sell more products to you that might be relevant based on your salary, your age bracket. And it's so annoying how many times you get phone calls from people that you've got no idea. I mean, I've had 5 phone calls in the last 2 days from people trying to encourage me to put solar panels on my roof. I can't recall
in this weather.
Yeah, exactly. So just be aware of what you are sharing, what purpose they're likely to use it. Yes, you can read the data policy, but as you say, we just want to get quickly onto whatever it is it's going to be. So you click yes, you read the terms and conditions. I mean, so it's not happened as much recently, but there was a games platform about 5 or 6 years ago that had a clause that said, by accepting these terms and conditions, you're selling your soul to us, and we'll be able to pass it on to the devil if we choose. It was a jest. It was to prove the point that people don't read the terms and conditions. Obviously, everyone did that, as far as we know. So, I'm not going to sit here and say read the terms and conditions, but have a quick scan. And, look at the bit that's going to be important to you, and where to find that is in a privacy policy that you find on websites. They will say what we will do with the data, who we will share it with. Most organizations will do that when you land on their website. You'll get that cookie alert, because there's all that data on your computer that will get shared without necessarily knowing about it. So my advice is reject cookies as a principle, unless it's a website you think you're going to need to log in more easily at a later stage. I mean, one tip I might give is not necessarily give the correct information. You might spell your name differently. I mean, mine's spelled with a V. I might spell it with a PH, just so that I know that they've used my data incorrectly. I might put an extra, or change the month of my date of birth, or even the year of the date of the birth, just so that they're not getting information that they might then use to open up false accounts in your names. I mean, a colleague of ours was hacked on his Facebook account, and the policies that Facebook have to get you back into your account are stringent, and it took him a good couple of days to sort that out, because somebody had tried hacking into it. And that's good to know that they take that process, but question is how they got the information to hack in the first place. So change some of the details, nothing too drastic. If you're using a website or sharing your information online with an entity that you're not likely to reuse again, then give them an email address that you're not going to use regularly, so you don't get bombarded with resales. I've got a Gmail account that I put in whenever I don't need to hear from that organization again, because there's a wall that you have to get through. They have to give you an email address, but you don't want to be bombarded later on. So I know that if I put in a fake one, not my work one, then I'm not going to get hit with a load of junk mail.
Yeah, it is all about protecting yourself and being aware, isn't it? And some of those tips I know that marketers will find frustrating, that they're not capturing genuine email addresses. But if you're a reputable organization, then I'm sure people will give you their genuine email address. You're right, there's games and and people enter their details. I've seen people on Facebook, considering people think it's closed, going, "Oh, here's my address, but I won't be in this afternoon." For example, you are in control and need to have your wits about you.
Yeah, I think with that as well, I've encouraged friends of ours to not post holiday pics whilst they're away, because if somebody already knows where you live and then sees that you're posting your holiday pics, then they know that you're not there. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Wait till you get home, then share everybody your pictures.
Yes. We've got a couple of questions, so I'll just jump. Roger, I'll come back to yours, but Harriet, thank you, and great question to prompt us. How often should we be changing passwords on social media accounts? And I think passwords is a really big issue. Of one, I would say, make sure you know who's got the password, what email account it's accounted to. I spend more time trying to retrieve passwords and find passwords than anything else. But yeah, Harriet's question about password management.
I'm trying to recall what the recommendation is now. I know the Cyber Resilience Centre and the NCIS, they pass out guidelines as to how frequently you should change your passwords. I can't recall whether it's 6 months or 9 months, apologies, but the likelihood is your organisation will remind you if you've got login details for remote access, for example, which most people will have post-COVID, is to change those passwords every 6 months. Mm-hmm. So password management is always difficult, and knowing what password you used for different accounts is always going to be difficult to remember. Most reputable sites will give that function of forgotten password, and that will help you out. It's a bit of a faff, but it's better than using the same password for everything. So big don't use the same password for everything. I mean, a lot of password requirements include a capital letter, a special character. And the thing is, you can't then remember which one was the special character and which one was the capital letter. And he's like, I can't remember. So you end up typing in a few variations. But you do something that you can remember. Use some function that enables you to store your passwords. There's software out there where you can have all of your passwords for different accounts secured, and then you use one password to get into that password locker. I think Roger's just suggested LastPass as an option. So, exactly, something of that nature is a good technique to just help you manage. But yeah, don't use personal information in your password because it's easy to guess. Your
birthdays,
your name, birthdays, your child's birthday, things like that. And a good tip, which I employ myself, is swapping out some of the characters. So, for example, an E, I might use a 3. Things like that, just to break it up and make it harder for somebody to guess.
Yeah, I was going to share my formula then, but that would be crazy to do that on a LinkedIn Live. So, listening. Yes, Roger, LastPass. Lucy said, make sure that you've got 2-factor authentication as well. That is also really important.
Absolutely.
Just going back, Roger has asked another question about the social media policy, saying, is it a question of trust and or mitigation of risk?
And that's a simple answer. As I said earlier on, employees are there to be trusted. Common sense will prevail. The organisation has to mitigate that risk, and to some extent, your social media policy, your privacy policy, will be looked at by an organisation such as the Information Commissioner's Office if there's a data breach. So if you have the training in place, the policy in place, and an employee just made a mistake, then the impact on the business is going to be far less. I mean, there was a massive scaremongering going on when GDPR was coming into force. There was talks of 4% of turnover, millions of pounds worth of fines. Yes, there have been some big fines for big organisations, which quite frankly should have known better and had better policies in place to protect the data that they hold. So it's right that they are fined. But organisations, small, medium enterprises, they are unlikely to face significant fines. Their reputation might take a hit. But from an ICO policing enforcement point of view, they're not there to cripple businesses. They're there to provide guidance. So if you're running an organisation make sure you've got those key steps in place. Have a privacy policy, have a social media policy, and make sure your staff are trained to use it. You train your staff, if you're in manufacturing, to use a circular saw correctly so they don't lob off the fingers.
Yeah.
It's not that much different.
Great comparison. Now, let's cover one more area, and I know that this is kind of your specialist area, copyright and IP as well. And I have come up against this in my own work around content creation. I'll just say, not that I've breached other people's, but I've had mine breached or issues. What advice have we got around content that you're posting on social media, how we can protect this, and also what to do if something happens to us?
Okay, so reposting, the functionalities there on most of the social media platforms. The way that operates tends to show the source from which it came, and therefore people are they're putting that out there. If they're allowing it to be reposted, then there's an implied consent that it can be reposted. My work has focused on websites pulling images off social media and then using them on web pages. That's a no-no, unless you have the consent of the person who took the photograph, because the photographer will be the first owner of that image. There was a very sad incident where a couple came to a rather unpleasant end, and the news around that particular area went onto the social media account and pulled a picture of the couple's wedding day. And that's hurtful from the family's point of view. The photographer themselves, didn't want that image going out. She was a friend of the family, and we've had to try and get the newspaper outlets to take that down. If you are going to use somebody else's information, ask them. That's the easiest way forward. If you get consent, then there's no infringement. If it's not possible, but you know whose image it is, give them credit. Most people will post or put a little C in the circle, which indicates they're asserting their copyright, and put their name in, and then you could say courtesy of when you repost it or reuse it. But if in doubt, don't use it.
It happens, and I'll just share. So there is royalty-free image libraries, which are fine. If you are Googling for an image, go to the settings, go down to advanced search, and then there's an option to tick a box that says Creative Commons license. So you can reduce your Google images down to images that you could actually use yourself. So it is possible to find images that you can use without breaching any issues. And Stephen, I've had it happen to me. I've had someone I talked about closing down my Facebook, but someone had taken the header image off my Facebook and used it on their own website to promote an event that I was speaking at, but they were also, not only did they take my image without asking, but they were promoting that event as if I was running it for them, and I had nothing to do with their organisation, never heard of them before, and was a little bit upset that they were doing that.
Rightly so. When it comes to your own content, whether that be the words of a blog or images that you've used, logos you've created, it is possible to do searches through Google, both of images and text, to see if that same content is repeated anywhere else. So you can police your own work if you feel that that's happening, and therefore I would advise those listening to drop some pictures into Google image search and see where it comes up, and you may be surprised at how often it comes out. But you can, as I mentioned earlier, you can assert copyright by putting a C in a circle and your name and the year that it was created. It puts them on any users on notice that that's something you're looking to do. You can also watermark images so that you're asserting your ownership over those rights as well. It makes it a little bit more difficult for the people to copy and paste.
And if policing it is brilliant, of course, and absolutely you should do that, and there's many ways that you can do that. What should you do as a final piece of advice if you do see that someone's using your content, using your images, basically breaching your copyright? What should we do?
Contact them and say stop. Or why do you think it was appropriate to do that? I mean, my bread and butter is closing down infringements, sending nasty letters to people, threatening court action if they don't do what we want them to do. But sometimes that's not right. That's not appropriate to do. It might be that there's an opportunity to collaborate with somebody. So a polite request in the first instance is all that's required. And if there's pushback, then we can get a little bit more serious. There's assistance online with how to draft letters of claim, or you come see a lawyer like myself.
Yeah, it can feel quite emotional when someone does that with your content and your images. And when we had a chat a couple of weeks ago, thinking about this session, you asked me what I did, and my two things were look at who it was and what the potential, reach of that breach of my content and potential impact could be, and also that I breathed, walked away from my computer for a little while, and then looked at it rationally, and then said, please don't do that message. So but there is support if it is more serious. Roger, thank you. I am doing a LinkedIn Live with Roger in a few weeks, but a brilliant question here. What are the implications for posting from ChatGPT, Bard, something like that? This is a new one.
Well, I'm also talking about AI
Yes.
as a different event. I think the excitement over ChatGPT was phenomenal, but it's starting to die down. I think that the people have realised that what comes out of that is a result of what goes in, and you cannot guarantee what has gone in is accurate. And on that basis, you should be incredibly cautious about using anything that comes out. There's some changes that happened with ChatGPT's terms and conditions, where it claims to then acquire the right in their output, and you ultimately then means that if you put something in, you lose it. So there's a significant concern, especially from a legal firm point of view, of putting information into ChatGPT and when that's going to be used for anybody else, because it forms part of the database upon which they will use for anybody else that logs in. So it's convenient. It does save time. It is, I think, an exciting technology, but at this moment in time, its purpose and its restrictions and its capability are unknown, and therefore I would caution against relying on it too heavily. If it's a short little article that you want to condense from 700 words to 500 words, okay, fine. If it's going to save you time doing that, then that's okay. But reread it after it's come out, make sure that it's still saying the same thing. Because it might be that they've decided to take out a rather crucial word that changes the whole tenor of what you're trying to put out. So I would definitely advise caution in using ChatGPT or any of the AIs that are out there. Brilliant,
thank you. And a brilliant question that has made me smile and wasn't a plant in any way, shape or form. But Stephen, if you could answer this one, this would be great. Sarah, thank you. Is it best practice to ask for permission even if you're promoting or recommending someone else's work? I.e., if I'd like to recommend Luan's book and use her logo book image on a post, is it okay?
Luan, would you feel comfortable if somebody reviewed your book?
Absolutely, and I will give on recording. I give full permission for anyone that wants to promote or recommend my book.
I think the issue comes back to what you were saying earlier, Luan, taking that time to think about, well, what has actually happened?
Yeah.
If somebody reposted an article that I'd written, I'd be like, well, okay, that's great. My words are reaching a wider field than they have done already, because everybody that person's connected to will then see what I've said. If they've changed it and they've taken my name off and added their own, then I'd be quite affronted.
Yeah.
And I would make sure that they took it down. So yes, it's best to ask permission, of course. I made that point earlier, but to some extent, if what you're doing is helping the person, then I doubt they would have issue with it, as you didn't. So ultimately, if you're doing it for the right reasons, there's a good chance the person who's affected won't take offence, but there's no guarantee, and therefore ask permission. Make sure that you've got
it. Is there a difference between if it's kind of publicly available, for example, I guess, if there's a TED talk out there already, you wouldn't need to contact the speaker because it's publicly available on YouTube, and like you said, we're posting the link and sharing it. We couldn't possibly do that for every single.
No, of course not. And what you're doing there is you're posting a link back to the source. So whoever clicks on the link is then going to see, actually, it's that person's copyright that's in play here, not yours. So I think that confusion is cleared up by posting the link. Different if you were taking snippets and re-editing a video and changing the output, because there's performance rights in question there, there's the recording rights of TED, and so you end up opening a whole bag of worms that you don't want to do. But if you're just posting the link, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and I think, just going back, the issue I'd have around my book is, overall, go for it, please do. But if you were to take an image out of it and post the image and didn't credit it to coming back from the book, and I've had that happen to me with presentation content as well, that is a slightly different issue, isn't it? So some great advice in there. I won't keep you any longer, because that's been a packed 30-minute session. I think there's something for everyone to take away and consider, and several actions already. So keep in touch. Everyone that's watching, there is more to come, more content. We will always be sharing links around privacy policies and settings and things that are happening in this world. So for today, Stephen, a huge thank you for joining us, and I will share contact details if anyone wants to get in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck.
Thanks.